Thanks Anna Kurth for that plug. Hi again, Hugh Lopdell here from Oak Park Chartered Accountants with the second video in our 4-part video series, Buying a Pharmacy. I've scripted these videos sequentially, so I encourage you to listen to the first video. We posted it on Facebook and YouTube if you haven't already. Now today I'm going to cover the money aspects of your purchase, so that's price and borrowing. So let's get straight into it. Valuation. Now, valuing a business requires putting a market value on 3 things commonly and then adding those up. The 3 things are assets, stock and goodwill. Now, for a normal business, a separate value is ascribed to each of those components and the sum of those is the price you pay. Pharmacies, however, are valued in a unique way where the entire value of the business, including those 3 components, goodwill, stock and assets, are calculated by a formula. Now the formula is EBIT, so that's earnings before interest and tax, times a multiplier, a number, normally between 4 and 5. Now EBIT is a term more commonly used in Australia. In New Zealand we call it net profit before tax, and if you have the vendor's profit and loss account, you can find net profit before tax figure in there. So valuing EBIT or net profit is pretty straightforward for an accountant or wholesaler. They'll make certain adjustments to the reported profit and ensure that the reported profit is maintainable into the future and not merely historic. Now, it's the value to put on the multiplier, which is the hard bit, and it needs an expert. Now, the multiplier reflects risk. So the greater the risk going forward, the lower the multiplier, the lower the value of the business you're buying. So if there's a heightened risk, for example, of a discounter moving nearby, the multiplier should drop to reflect this. Auckland in particular is riskier to buy a pharmacy, so multipliers there are a bit lower than elsewhere in the country. Conversely, if your pharmacy is within a medical centre building, say, with really good leases in place, your risk may be less than normal and your multiplier a little higher. So it's your wholesaler who will usually do this valuation. Typically, they prepare it for the vendor and you get to see it. For the most part, the valuations I've seen are more or less down the middle. They tend on the upside, but in due diligence, an accountant should look over that and give you their independent view. A couple of points to note. Remember, the vendor is the driver on price, not you. Now, despite the challenges in pharmacy in recent years, the demand by young pharmacists for new pharmacies purchases hasn't seemed to have diminished much. So if you balk on price or negotiate too hard, there'll be someone else in the queue happy to pay the asking price, probably. So this has kept prices generally higher despite challenges, especially from discounters. Now the next point, wholesalers' valuations are, in my experience, free because they're hoping to win your business. Now, if you use an accountant, it's going to cost you $3,000 plus GST or maybe even more, not a lot less. Now, there are, in my estimation too, only about 6 to 8 accounting firms in the country experienced enough in this industry to get the multiplier right, to know what the market drivers are and to how they apply to your particular location. Oak Park is one of those, but still, if it was me buying a pharmacy, I'd use the wholesaler's valuation from the vendor for free and get the accountant to check it. All right, a word or two on goodwill. Firstly, what is this thing? You pay a lot for it. Goodwill is what you pay the vendor for the established income of the business that you don't have to build up from scratch. What about potential goodwill? Some businesses have big untapped potential. I've seen this quite a bit, particularly from older pharmacists or traditional pharmacists. Say they don't do vaccinations and you know you can start doing that right away. while untapped potential should not be valued into the goodwill, so you don't generally pay the vendor for untapped potential, its presence does mean profit in the future and is of value to you if you can see it and tap into it. So bear that in mind. Conversely, the vendor may have been a very savvy business person and already exploited all the opportunities, meaning there's little or no untapped potential. The price shouldn't change either way, but it's something to be aware of when you're assessing the true value of what you're buying. Now, the peculiarity of this pharmacy valuation model is that it produces an all-in price, which includes assets and stock. Out of that total price, assets and stock is taken out, with the balance being goodwill. The assets figure is generally the book value at the last balance date of those fixed assets. Make sure it is adjusted up for asset purchases since that date. Goodwill is neutral for tax purposes, but assets are deductible for tax purposes to you by way of depreciation. So if there's any wriggle room to negotiate a higher value of assets, do that. Goodwill will come down to compensate. Now, the vendor will be wanting to do the reverse, but they're not always well advised, so may not push back. Note that the way this valuation method works, if the vendor has invested fit out and new equipment in the last, say, a couple of years, it won't add to the price. You won't pay for it. So that's a bonus if you find they've done that. Maybe just keep that quiet to yourself. Now, in regards to stock, there's a stock take that happens at settlement, and I'll talk more about that in my next video. All right, that's all on price. Next, I'm going to talk about borrowing. Due to the discounter threat, banks are jittery. They'd say they're discerning. I'd say they're a bit spooked by the discounter threat and are only lending to 3 times EBIT. So, if you're paying 5 times EBIT, they will lend you 60% of your purchase price, and you have to come up with the rest. Now, if the purchase price of the pharmacy is $1 million, guess what? You are having to find $400,000, which is a stack of money, particularly for a person or couple in, say, their early 30s to get their hands on. Your options for funding this deposit are your own savings, which is unlikely at a young age, but I have seen it. Equity on your home, if you bought, say, more than 2 or 3 years ago and there's been some capital gain and some debt retirement. Help from parents, vendor finance, and I believe in special cases wholesalers may help. Don't quote me, but if you're stuck, it doesn't hurt to ask. Remember, if you're getting family help for your deposit, their money is at risk. Now, you need to have an honest chat with them about that. They may need to receive their own advice, and you need to feel comfortable receiving their money in these circumstances. Any vendor finance is only going to be possible if you've worked as an employee of the vendor, built a really good relationship and trust. Now, you expect that you might have to pay a premium interest rate to them for this, because it'll probably be on good faith and maybe unsecured. Now, the bank. Now, they will take the assets of the pharmacy as security, as well as asking for a personal guarantee. Now, a personal guarantee is not a mortgage on your home, but in effect it is, because if everything goes pear-shaped, now that's unlikely unless you really mess up, they will ask you to fund any debt shortfall from your personal assets, meaning your house is exposed. So you may want to consider a trust with that in mind, and I cover trusts in my next video. The advantage of borrowing the deposit on spare equity in your home is you'll borrow at home loan rates, and we all see that they are at record lows, and they're certainly cheaper than commercial rates where you pay 2 to 2.5% more than home loan rates. Interest only. Now, a word on interest only loans, they have been popular with residential property borrowing, but you don't want to go down this track, and I actually don't know whether banks would let you and offer you interest only terms. You want to be aiming to repay this loan in 6 years, 7 tops. So you need to be repaying principal as you go. The whole idea is that the pharmacy is valued on its earnings, and as long as you didn't pay an unaffordable multiplier, the business is going to generate the required cash to clear that debt in that time frame. Stock loans. Now, your wholesaler will probably allow you to spread the payment of the first month's stock over the first 12 months of your business. Now, while that gives you cash flow help initially, it's pretty awesome actually. It's going to make your bank account look really nice. It's going to put a little strain on your cash flow for the rest of that first year, so don't go spending that cash in your bank. You will need it. Working capital. Now, working capital is the cash a business normally needs to borrow up front to get them through the first 6 or so weeks of costs till they start receiving receipts from invoicing in that first month. Now, retail businesses have some advantages here. You know, in month 1, you'll have cash from the sale of retail stock, you'll have co-payments received, you'll have your first month's case mix service fee received in advance. And you'll have to pay month one's rent out of that, your wages out of that, but not your purchases and your power, etc. until the 20th of the following month, or the 20th of the month after that if you receive a stock loan or you pay your wholesaler by credit card. So while you probably don't have a pressing need to borrow working capital compared to other new businesses, I still recommend that you ask the bank while you're negotiating all this financing. You get it all done in one hit for an overdraft facility of say 30 grand for comfort and flexibility. You know, after a year or two, once you find you don't need it, you can cancel it and save yourself some fees and interest. Remember too that when you're deciding how much to ask your bank for, borrow enough to fund the due diligence and legal costs. All right, that is all on price and borrowing. I hope you found it helpful. In my next video, video 3, I will cover the legal aspects, including structuring. Now, if you've got a question on anything I've said, you can give me a call. My phone number comes up shortly. Happy to help. If you know someone who's buying a pharmacy, share this video with them. I think they'll appreciate it. All right, that's all for now. Good luck. Hugh Lockdell from Oak Park Chartered Accountants.